Good afternoon, Elaine.
Good afternoon, Dana.
I am excited, but I think we say this every
Every episode, we're so excited.
We kind of have political royalty in
In the
our
house.
municipal,
I know.
municipal area. I'm excited for this guest because he is a Canadian politician who currently serves as the mayor of St. John. And Don is known to have an interest in colorful and flamboyant socks. This is what it says on your Wikipedia
Well,
file.
look, and if Wikipedia, last month I was a wrestler, so so I'm glad to be known for as the mayor of a great city and for my flamboyant socks. So that works.
Thank you. So
Welcome,
Don.
Welcome
Darling.
to Ross A, to
Thank
the
you.
home studio.
Yeah.
Dana's home studio.
And my first question for you is, why the hell would you get into politics?
Yeah, look, I ask myself that often. I reflect on it all the time, and I think the reason I wanted to get in remains the same after 3 tough years, and that's that I wanted to do meaningful work, and I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to do passion work. I wanted to do work that was aligned with my values, and I can say, there's a big check mark beside that. It's the most rewarding work that I've ever done, and it's the most difficult work that I've ever done, hands down.
But so you say that, right? So you wanted to make an impact. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could have made an impact, but politics, like municipal politics, it's tough.
Yeah, well, politics overall, municipal politics, you're the closest to the people. Social media has complicated this world, and I'm a very active user of social media, so it has resulted in a couple of hundred personal messages a week, tagged a couple of hundred times a week, but that's engagement, that's conversation, and when you thirst for, I think what we all have in common in this conversation today is we all thirst for meaningful conversation. So I think I went into it wanting to make a difference in my community, believing that I had the leadership capacity to do so, and that I had the passion, and I made a couple of ground rules and threw my hat in. So I know it's been the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. The highs are so high, but the lows are so low. And my eyes have been opened over 3 years, and whenever somebody comes and says, Don, should I do this? I'm very open and very honest with them about the life, about the rewards, but also about the sacrifices that come with any job, any leadership job, but in politics in particular, we seem to love to hate our politicians.
Yeah, it is a love-hate relationship. You said that you established some ground rules.
Just wrote that down.
Yeah.
What were some of those things? Because I imagine that you had a lot of considerations before you actually made a move to politics.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. It's, I had come through a significant transition. I had left a 20-year career in the corporate world where I had climbed the corporate mountain, and I had achieved, I planted the flag in the top of the mountain. I was an owner of the company. I was vice president of the company. I was, well compensated, but I was miserable, and it all resulted in a diagnosis of depression. So I have firsthand experience with mental health. Throughout that journey, before I answer your question, it gets to the principles or the promises I made to myself. If you were to ask me one question about that corporate, those 20 years, what would I change? The answer is vulnerability. I would have been more vulnerable. I would have said no. I would have said, no, I'm not jumping in a plane with no notice and flying to Labrador. No, I'm not working 80 hours a week. No, I'm not taking on those tasks without the resources, both human and financial. So back to the job of mayor, when I decided to run, I spoke to my wife, I spoke to my family members. The promises that I've lived every day in this job is, number one, that I would live my values and my principles no matter what. And number two, that I wouldn't make promises that I couldn't keep.
Right.
And that has made this job both incredibly rewarding and also very difficult, because I don't wake up in the morning behaving in a way that's going to get me a vote. I get up in the morning saying, what are the necessary conversations that are going to improve the community, the greater community, and where I can be the best leader possible. And that has rarely been easy.
I just saw something yesterday on Instagram about leadership, and it was because you're speaking right to what you're saying about you would have said no more, and it says leadership is about saying
Say
no,
no.
and that saying yes is easy, right? We can keep saying yes because then we don't disappoint people or whatever.
We've
So
talked about that in past episodes, right? It's this, the whole idea of essentialism, right? So figuring out what your yeses are, your hell yes, and then having the courage, right, and the strength, and having those curbs so that you know what the hell yes and the hell no's are.
Yeah, I think we each of us have our own unique, backstory, if you will, right? I mean, I grew up in a household with a good man, a good dad who was an alcoholic. That resulted in my mom and dad breaking up. It resulted in firsthand lived experience in poverty. I wanted things that my mom just wasn't capable of getting for me. So at an early age, I got programmed to work my ass off, to not say no, to provide for my family. I'm 40, be 49 this summer. I'm 48 now, and I didn't work some of those little pieces of the puzzle out until into my mid 40s. And so I've spent an awful lot of time, soul searching to find out what is it that makes me tick, and why was I, what were those learned behaviors, what were those filters, and although I'm in the toughest role I've ever been in my life, I have never been more grounded and more confident and more satisfied with my life. But that doesn't mean that there aren't challenges in it, like everyone else.
Because I'm thinking, how easy or hard is it to live according to your values when you're in politics?
Yeah, well,
you live it in the limelight.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's extremely difficult. But again, if I think it was again, when I left my corporate gig, in the fall of 13, I went out on sick leave, and then officially I left in the spring of 14. So you're 44, 45 years old, and I remember one day, in fact, being on a call with my coach. I was on a call, and I just burst into tears. And he said, "Whoa, okay, just take a breath. What's going on?"
Right. What was the trigger?
Well, honestly, I was sitting in a sun room, and I was looking outside, and the flowers were beautiful, and the bees were going around from flower to flower. And the water was in the background, and there were birds, and I noticed them. I noticed them. So for the first time in my life, I was content. I was good enough. I didn't need to work 90 hours a week. I didn't need to earn 4 times what the average person earned. I didn't need to say yes to everything. And those were the kinds of leap forwards that I had over that year of, what people were saying to me, "Oh, Don, you're going through a midlife crisis." And I said, "Oh, no. I am going through a midlife awakening."
Right, yeah.
And I am saying no to things that I should have said no to for, years
But you
prior.
didn't know, right? And so, as our friend Oprah says,
Yeah.
right, when we know better, we do better.
Right.
I think that was around the time that I met you, Don.
Yes, it was, yeah.
We
yeah.
had coffee
Yes, we
at
did.
Second Cup,
We
and
did.
somebody said to me, we were at an event together, and after the event, my friend Crystal Seeberger said,
That's right.
"You need to meet and chat with Don Darling."
Yeah.
And so we went and had coffee, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, I loved where you were in a place that you didn't know. There was like you were walking in molasses,
Right.
right? But you were just reaching out to people and having real conversations about life.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Actually, I talk to folks often about that time in my life, the courage that I needed to find, and I'm just so grateful to my wife Patty, who really the kickoff to all of this huge transition in my life is I was in Halifax, and I'd had not a great day, and I called Patty, and I'm a crier, so I sort of said, "How was your day?" which was a really difficult conversation, which turned into me crying. She said, "You know what to do." The short version is, she said, "You know what to do." And I said, "But I'm afraid." And she said, "Well, why are you afraid?" And I just defaulted to that providing for family. I said, "We're going to go bankrupt." And Patty, without hesitation, said to me, "Okay, let's do it." I said, what do you mean? She said, let's go bankrupt. Because that is
So
a,
now
That's
what's
a
the worst?
supportive
Right.
wife.
What's
But-
the worst that could
but
happen?
that's a
Yeah.
lot better
Yes.
than the life we're living where we almost got divorced 3 times because I was being such an ass, and I was working day and night, and I would eat standing up when I got home, and
Right.
I would open up my laptop again.
What kind of a life was
Yeah.
that?
It was a
wasn't-
horrific life, right?
Yeah.
So to find the courage, so to look after myself, to go out on sick leave, to get a diagnosis, of depression, to work through that, and to double down at that moment when we met, to go through extensive work with my psychologist, to unravel the past, to hire a coach, to do a bunch of visioning work, to reconnect with my values and my principles, to not know what next week and next month was going to bring, but despite the fear, find the courage to keep walking. So it was and at the same time, unfortunately, my dad fell ill, and we lost my dad 4 years ago now. But in a strange way, that time, my dad and I were able to heal and come together.
What a
So
beautiful
What a gift,
gift.
yeah.
Wow.
It truly.
But if you hadn't have left that position at that job, you would not have given yourself the time, space to do that with your dad.
I think that absolutely is true. I would have been too busy. I would have made
Right.
too many excuses. And this time off gave me time to slow down for once. I gave myself permission to not work and shed all of the, oh my gosh, what do you're not working? Because what do we do
Right.
as human
Yeah,
beings,
what do you do?
right?
I need some
Where are
validating.
you? Where are you from? Who are you?
Yeah,
what do you
what
do?
do you do?
Who am
you
I?
know, yeah. What kind of car
Without
do
it.
you drive? It's all that stuff. But what it gave me is that space. So Dad and I talked daily. We lunched weekly, and then as the end neared, I was able to spend the last couple of weeks with Dad, and by his bedside, and fight for him, and hold his hand, and the day before he died, I found the courage to have a conversation that was probably 25 years in the making. And I sat down and I said, for a long time, Dad, I thought all the good was Mom and all the bad was you. And here's what I've realized. And we celebrated together, although he was not verbally communicating at that stage, we celebrated together the all of the great attributes that I believe I got from my dad. And then I went out in the hallway and I wept like a baby.
That reckoning.
But that's an
Yep.
awakening. That is an awakening, because we do, and we look at, so even if your parents are together and they didn't get divorced, right? Or they're, for those of us that have parents or whatever, like we look at our parents and there is the good cop and the bad cop, right? So, but to see your parents as human beings, to get that gift, right? As we age, that's what I'm finding. I'm seeing my parents a different way. I'm seeing the gifts in getting to know them as human beings, not just as mom and dad, right?
I think my reflection there, my dad, like any was a human being, first and foremost. And I think what I'm most sad, if I say the word sad, what I'm most sad about for my dad is that he was never able to find the courage. So if you've never been shown love, how do you show love? So my
There's
dad,
no benchmark. They don't have.
my
there's nothing.
dad's dad, was an alcoholic. He left work in his 40s. He was financially quite successful, but emotionally miserable. And so my dad lived a tortured early life. And my dad was a brilliant man. Some of my, disclaimer, some of my family members get quite uncomfortable when I speak so openly, but I'm not going to sacrifice my values for someone else's discomfort. And so Dad never found the courage or the means to work through those challenges in his life. And as a result, the day that I finished up my legal situation with my former employer, I called my dad and I said, Dad, I just finished, I signed off on my paperwork. And he said, great, how did you do? And I said, well, I did okay. And he said, I'm so proud of you. So proud of you, he said. And I would have been 44 going on 45.
First time.
First time in my life. first time in my life
That you heard
Right?
those words.
that
from
I
your
heard
dad.
those words, and we you know, whether we know it or not, we need to know we're
Yes.
loved. We need to know that our
We're
parents, our
seen.
friends, we're
Yeah.
seen, that
Right.
that there's space for us to walk through this world. And so even though in my own family, you know, we have struggles like every other family, you know, I want to make sure that I say to my, like, you don't like what's going on, but we love you. And you're so capable, and we're so proud of you. But there's a gap between your capacity
Yeah.
and where we are. But and you know, I don't blame my dad. But
It's a
again,
different time they grew up in,
yeah,
and they have their own blocks.
and again, if you didn't have it, I mean, my dad's mom died young. She had MS. You know, so if you don't have that
You
in
don't
your
have the
life,
nurturing. There's
Yeah.
there's this, you know, and I've read, you know, some articles and studies on when there isn't a mom in the situation, right? So dads are a different breed. Dads are like, okay, go up in the tree and fall down, whatever. But from our moms, we get this nurturing sense of love, right? And so when there isn't a mom in the picture, it really does take away that capacity or that knowledge of how to have that deep love.
Well, I think my mom had to play a double role,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So, I mean, I can vividly remember 374 Charlotte Street, green duplex, upstairs, pretty cold because mom didn't have a lot of money for heat, but love and nurturing
Yes.
and
So you
reading to
didn't
me.
read, so the other things didn't seem as significant because you had that other
Yeah,
bit.
at the time, I think, but I mean, you know, when you don't know what you don't know, you don't know what you're missing, and you don't know what's buried in that subconscious, that ingrained need that we all have. So I guess I didn't know. You know, Dad and I had a really rocky relationship in my, you know, later teens. You know, I was married. I mean, Patty and I have been married 20 going on 28 years. We had kids young, and Dad would, you know, be behaving in certain ways. I'd say, like, this is done. I'm not bringing my kids around this. And so we took a big 10, 12-year gap, and then, you know, the relationship was better, but not great. And it was really, I mean, how unfortunate is it that in someone's last 6 months of their life, you know, you're able to you know, put a lot of those pieces of the puzzle together. And as a result, I mean, you know, I was able to deliver his eulogy. I was able to celebrate his life, and I was able to. I mean, I miss him every day.
Yeah.
But those pieces of the puzzle are important pieces.
How did it make you feel when your dad said he was proud of you for the first
Oh.
time hearing that? What happened within you?
Yeah, well, I hung up. I was incredibly emotional about it, and you know, I knew already. I mean, I'd done a lot of, again, you know, soul searching, a lot of work with you know, coaches. And I think that next summer I went and took my own coaching
You did the
certification.
coaching training, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, I thought I was going for some coach training. It's like getting naked
like,
every
yeah.
day. Like I'm just gonna start
Hello.
crying now as soon as I walk in the room, and for 9 weeks I'm gonna cry straight. Yeah, I think, you know, look, I knew it was a profound moment. I knew, and I think it changed me. I mean, I'm a different person today. I am a better person because of not only my mom, my dad, my wife, my kids, you know, the friends that I have, but I absorb energy from others, and I get up in the morning. I can't think of a person that I hate. I can't. Like I dislike some folks, you know, because I'd say there's mismatches or whatever.
Right.
But if I would give them whatever's in my pocket. I would
Yes.
pick them. So that's a values.
There's no that hate or malice. It's
Yeah.
just because you understand, though, because you took the time and the awareness. And I think probably in the relationship with your dad and that healing is that you see that everybody is having a struggle.
Yeah. I think that, you know, if I see so much hurt in the world, I see, you know, some folks look at the level of mental health challenges with teens, people who are afraid to be authentic, work cultures that are broken. You know, we care about you. All the posters say the right things, but people are
But in
falling out.
reality, right,
Right.
yeah.
And I experienced the same thing. I mean, I worked for a very good organization. but there was a complete mismatch between what was written on the wall and what was being demonstrated on a
Right.
daily basis.
Right.
So
Talk
we
about inauthenticity.
right.
Misalignment.
Yeah, so we are in a very trying time. I mean, the world of politics that I'm in is a blood sport. I mean,
Maybe that's how you got wrestler on your Wikipedia.
maybe, yeah.
Your
I
bio
I have
online.
contemplated the knee pads and the elbow pads, but it's and you know, when you're again a person that lives values, that doesn't make promises you can't keep, like it is you know, that's probably the most difficult part of the job. I can handle some of the meanness, and I don't like it, but I can handle it. It's integrity. It's the mismatch. Say one thing and do another.
They're
And
talking
that's,
out of both sides of their
yeah,
mouth.
well, that's not a world I
Yeah.
want to live in. I
No.
want to be around other passionate, positive people who want to make a difference in the world.
So how do you stay authentic in the blood sport that is politics?
Yeah. Well, look, for me, it's a non-negotiable. Period. I have never made a decision based on getting reelected. I get up in the morning. I passionately, work to deliver on results for the community. From day one, I've talked about the big buckets, growth, our fiscal situation and reforms. That's what we're focused on. And I also, by the way, you know, I talk about my dad's ism. I have one too. Right, so I'm a workaholic. I'm a little better than I was, but
So you so that didn't leave when you left your corporate job and you went through your awakening.
no.
Do you just love to work, or is this something?
I'd love to. I don't want to dismiss, because you know, part of the thing that I embrace around my depression is I could try to put a nice sweater on it and it was situational. It was just for a bit. No, I was depressed. I mean, I was diagnosed with clinical depression.
Yes.
In my case, I tell people when I tell this story, I'm not a doctor. In my case, because of all the, you know, the isms, I didn't want to take any drugs. I didn't, you know, they wanted to give me anti-anxiety, sleeping pills, antidepressants, and I didn't want to do that. I exercised instead.
Right.
So that was.
And you've had a physical transformation.
Yeah, I had a big physical transformation as well. So that was gave my personality something to focus on.
Right. Because you need to have that intense.
I'm driven. I'm passionate. I want it, regardless of what I achieved yesterday. I want to do more tomorrow. It's just my DNA. And my wife, again, Patty, is so. She knows me so well, and I'll come home at night and I'll say, well, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore. And she'll go, yes, right.
Yeah.
Until tomorrow.
And she'll nod, right,
Yep.
and let you do your thing.
She'll let me get a good night's sleep,
Yes.
and then I wake up in the morning and off I go again.
Right.
So you know, another huge awakening for me in my 30s when I was taking a course one time, and I was telling the instructor in front of 20 others. He said, it's called a process called collapse, where you basically, if you look at the positives and the negatives in anything, they pretty much equal out. And they asked me, what did I choose? And what about my dad? My dad's an alcoholic. And he said, oh, interesting, your dad has an addiction. What's yours? And the blood rushed out of my body. I thought I was going to faint.
Oh.
And I said, wow, okay,
You never thought of
interesting.
yourself as
No, I didn't
that
think.
work, that capacity to work long hours.
Well, it was, but
no one
but
wants to
again,
be known as an addict, right? Or what are you addicted to?
but again, think about the childhood. Think about the not having. Think about the bicycle that you want. Think about not being able to do whatever. And I was going to provide for my family, so the badge of honor was, no, I'm going to outwork you. And you know, the other piece of that, I have a lot of executive training, but I never went to university as well. So I graduated from high school. I had my roommate's name at Dalhousie. My dad was a business prof at UNB, wanted me to go to business school at UNB. He was absolutely right. And I think I've got, in my view, a couple of degrees at least. I've just gone around the other
You did the
course.
entrepreneurial degree.
Yeah, qualified by experience
Exactly.
is what I say. So I have my master's in QBE, and so but again, those are things that I carried as a bit of a cloak. You know, well, you didn't go to university,
Right.
so fast enough, smart enough,
Right.
strong enough. It's all those
All
things.
these
So
limiting beliefs.
yeah, so look, I'd say today I still work very hard, but I think I've learned to balance. We vacation. I know when it's time to take a day or two off to go for a nice drive.
Which we had sort of our
Yeah.
side chat on the way in,
Yeah.
right? When you
Yep.
were saying you needed to have more than
I love it. You
more than an
actually
hour
sign
here
off.
and there, right? You sign off,
Yeah.
and you
Sign
tell
off on
people,
social
"I'm
media.
signing
I'm out."
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm taking a break."
Yeah, and it's a strange world at times. I did that one time when we were on a vacation, and I said I'm taking a mental health break because I try to very openly and publicly. We have to end the stigma around mental health. So, and I said I'm going to take a physical break and a mental health break.
Yes.
I signed off for 1 week, and when I returned, the narrative online was that I was in a mental health hospital. Which I said I'm not sure who started that little rumor or whatever, and we addressed that.
But that's
So-
so
That's
that is
social
an
media.
assumption that people take, right? I mean, which is wrong. I mean, my daughter, I was talking to her the other day, and she was supposed to go to work. She goes, "I took a mental health day," and I'm like, "Bravo!" And when my kids were in high school, and high school is a blood sport too. I mean, it's bad. And my kids would say, "I need a mental health day." I'm like, "Okay."
Take it.
And so they would lose their exemptions, and I'm like, "I don't care."
Yeah.
Like, if you need a day to be away from whatever's going on at school, we're good with that.
I think we need to be very concerned that we live in a world now, not just in Toronto or Vancouver or New York City, but in St. John and Greater St. John, where we have a very high level of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, drug use, drug abuse, alcoholism in teens.
Yes.
What are we doing? What are we doing? What pressure?
Or what aren't we doing?
Or aren't?
What aren't we
aren't.
doing?
So what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is that? What is that climate that exists? That framework that exists. What pressure have we created, or space have we not created? Because I'm
Do we want to go down that road? Because I got some thoughts.
Well, that's podcast
That's
2.0.
another story.
But as a leader,
Yeah.
as a political leader, there are municipal, provincial, and federal jurisdictions. Most people, frankly, get very confused about those. But let's use poverty for example. I'm very
Yes.
passionate about poverty. We don't have the means as municipalities to take on the cost of that. But it doesn't mean I can't advocate
Right.
for
Right.
change.
Right.
And one of the things that has been has been the most frustrating for me in this role is what is the plan? Like the fundamentals. What's the plan? What are the objectives that we're trying to achieve? What's the work plan to work through the year? How are we going to measure progress? And who are we holding accountable? So year after year, if we run those fundamentals, then we're going to make huge differences in our community. And I don't see that as often as we need to see that.
But that's you bringing
Right.
thankfully bringing your business knowledge into municipal, running our municipalities.
Right.
And I think that those are, and some people may not like me saying this, but I think that we need to have some of those checks and balances. We need to measure things, right? We need to ask those questions. I mean, a conversation the other day. Like every time you go somewhere now, they're asking for a donation. But
Yeah.
how do I know where that money is going? How are they spending it? Like what is that? So I think from a municipality, I think we need to start asking.
Well, I take it a step further. Again, if I went into a meeting and said, I'm not going to ask this because some people might not like it. I mean, that's my everyday.
Right.
That's my every day, because again, the change that we need now is going to ruffle some folks. And I think we do need to be asking ourselves around the greater region. I mean, there's so much fundraising going on now. I think frankly, there needs to be, fewer agencies, fewer groups, better funded though,
Yes.
groups that have the supports necessary to go and do that job, and those fundamentals need to be in place. And that is lacking. We need to attract, I think, more leaders that bring that kind of thinking, but the challenge is again, there are regularly I'm in conversations with people that said I would never do your job. The expectations are high, the hours are long, the pay is low, and that doesn't bode well for the future of politics because
You're not
you
going
know,
to get people who care.
Attract
well, it's
people.
not
Carried
about
out
no.
her
I mean,
passion,
lots
no?
of people care. It's just you need. Let me say it this way. I mean, the city of St. John is a $200 million corporation. We should have the best possible
People,
board
yes.
members called counselors around that table that can think big picture and long term, that are willing to make the tough decisions to have a thriving region. You know?
Gosh, have you always been this vulnerable?
No. I think that the awakening through that, fall of 13, 14, 15, and then I've just continued to, when you leave a big corporate job, your dad is diagnosed with cancer, leading up to that, Patty, and rightly so, told me we were done a couple of times because I was being, again, such an asshole. I'm not sure if I can say that, but it was true.
Yeah.
So out of that, I trampled my values. I sold them, frankly, for a paycheck. I pushed them down. When they screamed at me, I said, no, be quiet, and I'm not doing it again. It made me sick. It made me unhappy. It took the spark out of me, and I'm not doing it again.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens. That you're right. Is when people ignore their values, it will rear its ugly
It'll
head
show up
eventually. And I love that you called it a life awakening, because that's what I believe as well. It's not a life midlife crisis, because I would say I had a quarter life crisis, but it was really a quarter life awakening. I was blessed that I had it then, and because I think confusion comes before clarity. So when all of that's happening, it means you're going to give birth to something new, whether you want it or not. It's going to come up.
I agree totally with you, and I think that if we're spending more time to meet the whatever that persona is that sort of society has prescribed, and less time on living the authentic life that we want for ourselves, and we may not even know.
No.
Most people don't know because it's scary.
It is.
What if I need to change a relationship? What if I need to sell the big house? What if I need to sell the car? What if I need to tell my kids they need to pick up and provide more for themselves because I'm done? What if I have to tell my boss that I no longer like the job? Right? I recently, a good friend of mine suggested an app to me, and I put it on my phone. Some people are gonna snicker a bit, and it's called We Croak.
We croak?
And it sends you 2 or 3 reminders a day that we all have an expiry date. And I usually say we all have a runway. And I don't know if my runway is 50 more years, or I don't know if my runway is 5 more years, and I sure as heck hope it's not 5. But what I know is that every single day, and especially in the last 4 or 5, that I want to live each day to its fullest, be aligned, and not be afraid that if what I'm doing doesn't make me happy, to say so. And say, yeah, you know what, this isn't working. And that's what I feel is the biggest blessing. Patty and I are having more authentic, aligned, meaningful conversations now. I have never, ever felt happier about the relationship with my wife. She's my best friend. I love her. She's incredible. She's thoughtful and kind and compassionate. I mean, on and on. And that has only been arrived at because I embraced my vulnerability, because I embraced my authenticity, that because I'm stronger now than I've ever been, that I don't need to be liked, that my confidence comes from within. Now, do I like conflict? No, not really. Do I like going into rooms where people don't want to talk to me? Not really. On and on and on.
That's tough.
But I have choices too.
Right.
I can be in those rooms. I can choose to sell myself away again. But I'm just not going to do it.
That's so interesting, because I'm thinking, when I heard that, I'm thinking, where does this vulnerability come from? And it feels like you were cracked open. And I know I follow you on Twitter, and you tweet, I don't know if it's a lot, but I've seen it a fair amount about Brené Brown and quotes, I think we all do, about vulnerability and courage. And
yes.
I know you watched her Netflix special, and one of the things she says about vulnerability is no vulnerability without uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And it feels like you've experienced all those as you have become more and more vulnerable. Would
Yeah.
you say it's true?
That's absolutely true, and I think it's the problem is it's really that we have these fears, right? I mean, we fear. We fear change. We fear being vulnerable. It's seen as a weakness. It's not a weakness, folks. It's a strength.
Yes.
Vulnerability is a
But
strength.
vulnerability
big
is
myth.
really being you.
Right.
It's being you and then not filtering yourself for fear of what other people are going to think of you
Right.
for being you.
Well, agreed. And I mean, the other challenge that we've got, and that's where thought leaders and like this conversation we're having today, this is about changing, society. It's about changing norms. And it's, I gave a chat a few weeks ago around mental health resiliency to the RCMP. In Fredericton, there was about 75 or 80 people in the room, both registered members and other civilian staff and so on. And I said, look, a couple things before we get started. I want to just tell you, I just want to be real here.
Yes.
Like, I'm not asking your permission for it. I'm telling you that's
Just
what I'm
letting
gonna
you
do.
know what's going to happen.
I always ask, can I swear?
Oh, phew.
Like, let's get real with each other. And I told a bit of an elongated version of my story. And within that, bridging to them the lessons. And one of the key pieces of this is that as individuals, we often want to blame the other. We often say, well, I can't because, or I can't quit my job because I have a mortgage, or I can't change because of this, and I think that what I wanted to leave folks with is that, like, the power for you to transform your life, to live the most full and complete and authentic and happy life that you dream about. It's just that gap between awareness, it's action.
Yeah.
And it's scary. Like, I wouldn't say for a second, but I can tell you that phone call in late August of 2013, that fall was very difficult. I thought things were going to completely come unglued. I thought we were going to go bankrupt. I thought I was going to lose, everything I cared about. And what I can tell you sitting with you here today is none of that was true. In fact, my life has never been more rich. I've never felt more fulfilled. I've never been more confident. I've never been more in love with my wife. I've never appreciated my kids more. And here's the bonus track. I've never actually cared less about my house, my car, the stuff I used to buy, the stuff, I want experiences. I want to live. I want to have rich experiences with people. And again, it doesn't matter. I don't care about class. I don't care about incomes. I care deeply about connecting. And I think that, so my Simon Sinek why, if you know
Yes.
Simon Sinek, which I know you would, my Simon Sinek why is to powerfully inspire others to live vulnerable and authentic lives. And I do that by going first.
Oh, yes. And I
By
think
going first.
You got to go first.
Yeah,
You gotta
and I think leading the way, and so to just wrap
So
up.
you're like,
yeah, we got to
raise in the roof on that one.
Because when we were talking about how do we, overcome the stigma or what's happening with our teens, and it feels like vulnerability is the way. There's something about that
The kids need to embrace or even acknowledge vulnerability.
and becoming more authentic. Because I always say, as the more I know for myself, the more vulnerable and authentic I've become, the more success I have had. And it feels like that is the way, is authenticity and showing
Look,
up as you.
here's what I've experienced, and I'll give you a couple of examples, not in detail, but a couple of examples from the RCMP
Yes.
chat a few weeks back. And the currency for me is I want to connect with people. And so the currency is, you end your chat and I'm watching the room. How's this going? And there's some watery eyes and there's some claps and there's this, and at the end there was I don't share for this reason. And some people rose and they gave me a big applause. But more importantly, I wondered who would stay behind. Who did I connect with? What will those connections be? And the interesting part is it was multitude of connection. But at the root of it, none of that would have happened. Every time I'm vulnerable, every time I try my best to connect, and it's not perfect every day, but it pays back tenfold, right? You know, one of my best friends right now that I have enjoyed a deep, caring, and trust-filled relationship with, I didn't know 3 years ago. And I got to know him because I shared openly and vulnerably with his wife at a luncheon, and after the luncheon his wife said, would you have a coffee with my husband? I think he could benefit from knowing you. And it's one of the most rich relationships I have 3 years later.
And I think this is why it's so refreshing is that you're a man who are being very vulnerable. And I don't know if I don't want to say I'm stereotyping, but often men aren't as vulnerable. They're a little bit more guarded. You know, I don't know if that's programming, but I think that's part of the reason why it's refreshing and why you connect with people, because they go, there's a guy who's telling his story of his deep, you know, the lowest lows.
But I think it is programming, that's the problem. So, you know, big boys don't cry.
Right.
Yes.
Get yourself up off the ground,
Right.
even if your arm's twisted backwards, and shake it off.
Right.
You know, you don't need a Band-Aid. You know, whatever.
Right.
Or nurturing.
We do.
Stop, don't
You know,
cry. Don't do this.
yeah.
Right.
Suck it up.
So,
Yeah.
so if you're in your 40s or if you're even older, you know, you've been programmed, right? I think this next generation has probably got a better chance, you know, but I think we have to break those stereotypes, and we have to say to people, it's okay not to be okay. And we have to say to our kids, friends, you know, acquaintances, if your job is treating you like crap, if your values are being trampled, if you go to work every day feeling sick, change it. And what I say to my own kids is that, look, number one, Mom and I have done our best. We will always offer you help. If you want to go talk to somebody, we did our best. You know, when I was younger, I didn't know what I know today, right? So there's that piece. And I say to my kids, you know, if you keep consumption, number one, if you're confident, if you know who you are, you know your values and your principles, and you live them, and your confidence comes from within, and you keep consumption under control, then you're going to live a great life, right? But as soon as you fall, trap or victim to, you know, keeping up with the Joneses and muting yourself and not living your values, then you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. And you know, our son is you know, graduated a couple of years ago now. He doesn't really know yet what he wants to do. He's tried a few you know, different jobs, and he's still searching. And you know, that's okay. You know, so you know what he does, I want him to do with vigor, I want him to do with passion, I want him to show up on time and do all those things, because those can be applied.
And share his presence, share who he is.
Yeah, and I think it takes some time to figure those things out. I mean, I've met some awfully incredible young leaders in our communities, but you know, it takes time, and you've got to, you know, I think, in my view, and I know that there are highs and lows in our lives, and we learn most from the lows. We learn from the scars, right? Yeah. And what I would encourage people to do is lean into them, even though it's so scary and so painful, to learn and in fact run toward those dark or difficult times, because you know, when you don't, you leave so much opportunity on the table. That's true. And you're going to come back. Trust me, you're coming back to it.
Anyway.
Whether you know it or not.
You're going to circle back.
You're circling back, right? You're circling back.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. I'll say this and I'll say it again. The three qualities of the podcast guest is warm, authentic, and vulnerable, and you've been all three of those today. And I could keep this running all day, honestly.
Thanks.
But thank you so much for showing up and being authentic and vulnerable.
That was a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Yeah.